Where there is smoke, there's fire. We're going to talk about spirituality, what the words mean, what spirituality actually means. We might even get into rituals and even the blood over intent again, because I've been getting a few people that are actually curious about it, and some people that have had bad experiences due to it. And we'll talk about how that can occur, why it occurs, and but first I wanted to get into this idea of spirituality. The word spirituality comes from spiral ritual. The word ritual comes from rites. You write your rights. Your rights have to do with the spiral plane that you live on. Well, not the spiral plane, but you live on a plane and you can spiral in either direction. It has to do with these two words, stagnation and what it would be to be a spiral. Something that is stagnant, like a pond. It becomes murky and there's you can't it's a mess in there, right? If you live on a plane, we're on a plane, and if people are living their lives in a way that has no spirituality, what they really don't have is a spiral in one way or another. So if you're on this flat plane, you can either be spiraling up or down. Behold, you see the ladder, and it goes up and down. So the ideas of going up or down the ladder and up and down the spine and up or down spiritually, people go through these levelings ups and leveling downs. And the goal here for everyone is to start leveling up and to go up and to grab people when they're walking by and pull them with them and to reach their hand down and help who they can. But don't, the idea of going all the way back down to those places you've already been. Well, I think we've all learned our lessons with those things, haven't we? So the spiral ritual, it's a spire. And the spiral is about the ideas and actions that you take in your life, the type of energy that you're putting out. And a lot of people are not spiritual because, and even the term and what it's getting into is people aren't spiritual because they're going through a flat circular motion. They're two-dimensional people. The the rhythms, the the curious paths that they might take, they go in circles, they go in loops. And if you were to look at it from a three-dimensional standpoint, you'd see it's a flat loop. It's a flatness. It's like a flat line. The person's dead, they're flatlining because they're walking along this certain path. They're not doing anything to either improve or um, to do anything to harm themselves either. They're just in a normal path. And in a lot of ways, a lot of people, what they do is they're in this very slow downward spiral towards death, and that's what death is. The energy system that is your body, it just gives up on. It goes towards a lower, denser realm. It there's no influx of energy. It's just a slow leak. It's like if you had a pin prick in a tire, it'd be a slow leak, and that's what happens to people, so they don't notice. It's like the allegory of the frog. You put the frog in the cold water and you turn the heat on, and now you start boiling it, and by the time it gets to boiling, the frog didn't notice. And so this is what happens. This is how people die. This is how people get to their grave. But the entire time, most people are on this like flat plane, and it's sinking slowly. And so to be involved with what spirituality is, it gets into these four elements and these four seasons and the way that we breathe. And I'm considering this for everyone here, so because it's winter for everyone. Well, it's not winter for everybody in the south, but it is the season for the people in the north. It's cold. It's winter. And so what should be done during the winter? Well, you would start a fire, and you'd have elements around you. You'd have dried plant life that you've saved. You'd have beer that you'd made. You'd have you'd have the all of the elements that you'd want to burn. And so this goes into even the the tabaceros and the ayahuasqueros and these um, plant life, the shamanic plant life providers, the ones that would bring the elements to the community during the time of after Adam, autumn, after the fall of man, after things get cold and dark. And so during this season, they would bring light, and they would bring light through actual fire, and they would burn substances. So this idea of where people are in the winter should be, you should be considering the idea of what tobacco really is and what all of these other plant life and these plant substances are. There's an idea of stewing them and eating soup. Soup is for supper. And there's also the idea of burning the herbs, because when you burn something, the element rises, it goes up, it turns into a mist. It involves itself in going up into the ether. So this is why the idea of what happens during the winter is that you're um, even in the darkness, because darkness is associated with winter. What you're doing is you're getting into the nighttime planning stages of what you're going to do for the spring. So right now you're in a stage like I've always, if you watch my other videos, we talked about what the new year was, and it's not here yet. This is why right now, if there is smoke, there is fire. You start a fire, and you start putting your ideas and your passions and your motivations onto paper, into plant life, into your mind, and you put them on the fire, and then it goes off into the ether. And in the spring, it starts. That's when you plant these things. That's when these things start to come to fruition. As the water hits from the spring, as the water comes down, and it starts to, and these things blossom. That is the same thing that happens in your consciousness. That's the same thing that happens daily, momentarily. It happens in the magical realms. So now when we're talking about smoking here, and if we really look into the use of these sacred plant substances, when they're not adulterated with all of these chemicals, there's much wisdom in these plants. See, people smoke 2 packs a day, whatever. That's not how it's supposed to be used. But then again, they're addicted to all the chemical substances in there. So using these elements as a ritual, because we're getting into spirituality, it's a ritual substance. The ritual would be just like people have a ritual of using coffee. And again, once again, coffee is a bean, and if it's used properly, if it's used and it's not sprayed and it comes from the right sources and you're making it the right way and you're using it as a ritual, then it has a whole different experience. It has a whole different mindset, because now instead of being an addiction, it's a ritual. Because an addiction is something you do 25 times a day. A ritual is something that you might do once a day, or maybe once a week, or whatever you would choose that ritual to be. And it would be something that would be benefiting your life, not taking away from. It would be spiraling you upwards rather than spiraling you downwards. So now let's look at the idea of how. How would you smoke? How should you smoke? People don't even know how to. This is a very advanced concept. I mean, it's a basic concept, but nobody's ever really spoke about this. But let's look at it this way. If things should be rising, let me change my pen here and get to this here. Okay, there we go. If things are rising up as you burn it, you burn something and the smoke comes off and goes up. If you are breathing into your mouth, if you smoke something and it goes down here, all you're doing is you're bypassing this realm up here. And if you know that your nose is directly accessing your brain, if you smoke and you bring it into your mouth and you bring it down to the lungs, you've bypassed the upper realms. You eat through your mouth. You put food in your mouth. Things that would rise, there would be no reason to breathe it into your mouth. So you'd breathe it into your mouth and put it into your mouth area, not down your throat. See, you'd put it into your mouth and let it sit there, and then I guess it's called, what is it called, a French inhale? You would let it rise up into your nose, and that would go up into your brain. See? So now, and also what's happening is because your nose is a smaller portal, by breathing in your nostrils, and that you can once again even go further into this using a left or a right nostril, the left being uh, for your right-handed side and for your masculine side, and your right nostril would be for your left side, would be your feminine side. And so that would be more advanced concepts, but the idea right off the bat is to use your nose to inhale. And because your nose is a smaller portal, you're actually causing the smoke to spiral up through and inside of and into your head, so it spirals into your consciousness. And so as you do that, it makes this loop and it goes back down into your lungs. And here it is in your lungs. It goes up and down into your lungs and into your brain. And It's a whole different concept. You're bringing energy up just like this. You're spiraling the energy up. If you don't do that and you're inhaling all day long down into your lungs, you're pulling energy down. There's no consciousness in that, and it shouldn't be bypass. It shouldn't be bypassing your throat. Hold on, guys. Okay. So again, the smoke should not be going down your throat. It wouldn't be. Your throat is your trumpet of God. You wouldn't put it in through there. It's the same way that you would blow a trumpet. It's for your out breath, and this gets into the breathing patterns of what you're doing whenever you're breathing towards the, you're breathing in the fire towards the summer element, which is the fire. So if you're burning something with fire and you bring it up your nose into a nose breath, you're getting into the theta realms. Follow me here. So if you're breathing into your mouth, then you're breathing into the lower realms. You're breathing into what is winter. You're bringing your breathing pattern down into a beta, and we know that theta is a dream state. It's a comfortable state. So by just changing the way and the idea of what you consider to be ingestion of plant life, I mean, there's all sorts of different herbs that you can use. It's not just tobacco. And if everybody has people have a big problem with alcohol and tobacco these days. Everybody smoke the weed, but let's remember all of these plant life, all of these things are sacred and they should be used properly. And people are going the wrong way with marijuana. They're using it too much. They're calling it a panacea, and it's just not true. It's something that can be used in line. It can be helpful, but just in the same way, all of the other plant life haven't been studied because nobody talks about smoking them because they don't know anything about it. But there's plenty mugwort, and you can get into why would the Indian, why would they be smoking the cloves? We'll get into what cloves are, and there's a reason to put that in there, or nutmeg, or these different spices that are in the tobacco. Now, if you're breathing it in through your nose versus your mouth, you're changing what brain pattern you're in. You're changing the element and where that element is going while it's in your brain. So if you're on a patterning of, say, breathing in your nose and out of your mouth, you're getting into a delta brainwave, and you're pulling that information up into your brain and then down. So you're putting that element into that brainwave. So this is more advanced stuff, but we have to consider these seasons and what should be used during these seasons. Because if we look into the humors, the idea of there's a hot, there's a cold, there's a wet, and there's a dry. And so it was always thought that if someone was phlegmy, if you had phlegm, if you were cold and wet, that you'd want something hot and dry. That if people would smoke something, if people would take a hot, dry substance, it would combat the wet, cold, which is true. But we're so lost in everything else that's going on in our body that we consider, oh no, cigarettes and smoke are bad and it's going to give you cancer, but we're so far away from the truth on that, because yeah, if you smoke 20 cigarettes a day and they're filled with chemical toxic substances, of course you're causing yourself a lot of harm. But if you are wet and cold and you take in and you inhale a plant life substance, whatever it might be, tobacco or otherwise, you're combating that issue. The same way, just if you were hot, if you were hot and dry, you want something cold and wet. If you're hot and dry, tell me you don't want water. It's so obviously basic. It's just right there. I'll lay it out for you. If you're hot and dry, you want something cold and wet. It's simple. And if we start off, as I always would attempt to get people to do, start off with where you are right now, sitting with your eyes closed. And then what is the first thing that you would open your eyes, and what would you think about your reality? You would look at these elements in a very simple way. You'd look at the water, you say, that's wet. You'd walk outside, and if it was cold out, you'd say, I want fire. That would be warm. And starting from your most basic senses, sensing the world through your five senses like a child, then you come to the reality, you come to actuality, and what this matrix really is, the real mother Earth. And you get away from all of the information that is just out there. It's just clouding your vision. It's getting in your way. But then when you hear something like this, oh, isn't it just so obvious? Oh, of course that's why I'd breathe in through my nose. Of course that's why I would do that. Of course that's what that plant is for. Oh, that's right. That's why we have fire. So, when we get into these humors and these elements, the most basic things you can think about for healing yourself in any form, like wherever you are, is you just use your senses. If you are hot, you want to be cold, you want to cool down. If you're dry, you'd like to moisten yourself up. And these things are basic. And this even gets into why you'd want to use oil and enemas and things like these, like because now you can insert things into your body to speed along a process. So what else did I want to get in here, guys? I think that's about it for here. Oh yeah, blood over intent. Let me get back to this ritual thing. This is I definitely want to speak about this. Everything that you do is a ritual, and the rituals that you don't know you're doing are called habits. They're called addictions. When you're aware of what you're doing, then you have control of your diction, meaning control of your words, therefore you have control of your actions. And if it's in your subconscious and you're doing it out of addiction, meaning you're just doing it, then that's a totally different thing. It's still a ritual. It's still a ritual, but it's a subconscious one, and you play out a patterning. But if you become aware, and now all of a sudden, then you have control over it. Then you can manipulate it the way you want. So what does this have to do with blood over intent? There's power in everything you do. That in and of itself is a ritual, and it uses a very high form of energy, a high form of magic, and a high form of intention, because psychologically, starting from there, how it works is to be so instilled with whatever it is, fear or love. A lot of people did this out of fear because they wanted a solution to a problem, and a lot of people did this out of love. And so you see dynamically different results for people. Some people are have a great experience from it, and some have an awful experience because now they've psychologically put themselves in a position to cut themselves, to actually leak blood, something they would never do. You pee all day. You could pee. You could sweat on something. It's more difficult to sweat. You could use semen. See, now that takes more energy and there's more pleasure in that, right? So you could take any one of your bodily fluids, all have energy in it. In fact, anybody that goes in this blood is the most sacred substance. I'm not sure that I completely agree with this because blood doesn't make life. Semen does. The woman, if you get into what the woman is and making eggs and what that has to do with things, we can say there's at least a parallel between what seminal fluid is and what blood might be. But nonetheless, both of these things have life and energy in them, just as your sweat does, just as your tears do, just as your urine does. So now all of these things can be used in ritual, ceremonial things and practices as well, if you choose to. And they can be used to instill energy into the magical arts that go off into the realm of the four elements, into the ether, and make things happen. But now what happens here with this blood ritual, this because it is a ritual, is that the connection to people's fear of, oh, I need to get out of this matrix, it's an illusion, it's terrible, da da, that is that they're getting the equal opposite return of that. They're putting that energy into it, and on top of that they went and did something that they would never ever do. No one would ever put a needle and cut themselves and bleed on something. Yeah, it's only a prick, it's only this, it's only I get people's ideas about that. But truly, to go to that psychological point, the results are going to be fast. Yes, you're going to release a lot of karma, but you're also releasing those, and people call them demons, and it is to a degree. You release energy into the world that allows these lower life forms that are and lower thought forms that are inside of your head to actually confront you more immediately. And if you don't know what you're doing and you're not cleansed, then the results are going to be quite bizarre. But it's again, these are no worries because any ritual that's done you can change. Anything that you've done you can negate. Anything that you can always just go, okay, I redact all of my bindings, I void. You can look into the video that I did a while back on soul contracts, revocations. So anything that you've done you can void. And I'm not saying to void a contract of your blood over intent. I'm not suggesting that. Because if it was with good intention and it has the words that you want to be loving towards all and everything that you said on there, that's just perfectly fine. But just know that right now, whatever you're dealing with, if it is negative, it's the only is the repercussions of the larger karmic bonds and bindings that you have through the thoughts and the physical, um, what was physically in your blood, if we put it that way. Because what karma is, again, is the carnivorous action of consuming and vampirically sucking in energies and blood from other creatures, especially energies. And now, if you let your blood out, you're letting out that, by one drop of blood, that has your entire coding of your reality in it. And so, if you put it on the paper, now you've literally let that out of you, and you've bound it to that paper. Now, when those things come to you, you're like, whoa, or you have these dreams, you're like, whoa, that's what occurs. Now, all you have to do is get your mind back, get to center, cleanse yourself. There's no problem with doing the ritual and the intent, but just in my other videos, I always said very heavily to people, and I had some people that were very upset with what I said because they didn't listen to the whole thing. And it's that if you're not cleansed and you don't know what you're doing, and you're doing the ritualistic practice out of a fear-based mindset and not completely out of 100% towards an objective magnetically in the future, if you're doing it out of a position of saying, oh no, this all sucks and people are and I hate this, if you do that, you're getting the response mechanism of that. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. I think I've covered everything I want here: smoking, blood over intent, rituals, mindset, psychology, burning, fire in the correct season. Again, guys, it's not. The spring is the new year. This is when you put your plans together. Put your good plans together. Put it on paper. Do some of your own ritual. Do some of your own calendar making, map making. I've covered all of this. So anybody that's new to my stuff, it is the complete course in all things. Anybody that has been following this work, I'm sure that they would tell you the same. This is the whole thing. So have a beautiful day, guys. Talk soon.